Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Dr. Mohanty's Modeling and Simulation. In this section we'll talk about soils of India, and just like soil classification, also what are different types and different soil orders. Um, as you know, just like plants and animals are classified into different kingdoms, plant animal kingdoms, into different species. Similarly, soils are also classified into different orders. There are 12 orders, then suborders, 63 suborders, grade groups, 319 grade groups, subgroups, 2484, and families, species. So this classification provides a means of communication among persons working in this areas of soil science. And you know pedology, study of soil, pedogenesis as a formation of soils and different orders, order, all those things. Uh, in this actually इसमें हम will talk about soils of India. What are those soils that are you find in India? So and what are their major characteristics? So I'm trying to tell you something मैं बताने की कोशिश करूँगा. So you know the total geographical area of India. This is very common question, 329 million hectares, and you'll find great variation um, in the soil types from north to south, east to west. Just my own understanding, and for your own understanding, I'm just telling you. You might have seen, the northern belts, great alluvial plains of India. So Indo-Gangetic plains, alluvial soils, Punjab, Haryana, and then UP. And similarly, you will also find desert soils in Rajasthan. Then moving to eastern part, northeastern part, red laterite soils, then southern belts also Tamil Nadu, then black soils in central part and western part of India. So everywhere you go, why it is so? Because as I mentioned earlier in my previous video, it is about climatic factors, topography. These are all factors that help and the parent material. So when you find different types of soil, so what are those active or passive factors of soil formation? They act into play. Because of these factors, you find different kinds of soil, different types of soils in India. And our climatic variation, how different it is: tropical, subtropical, then desert, then cold desert, arid desert, all sorts of things you'll find: humid, dry, wet. Oh, so many, so many. इसीलिए इसीलिए यूल्फा आपको इतना सारे चीज दिखाए देखने को मिलता है इंडिया में. इट्स बिग कंट्री, दैट्स व्हाई यू गेट दैट मेनी. So India has all major soil orders present in the world almost, you know. And if I categorize them, so in the simplest form, let's start with the alluvial soils. So it is one of the, mm, India is one of the richest country in the world, in terms of alluvial soils. It supports food grains and more than 40% of Indian populations in the coastal areas, well, river belts. That's where I actually find the alluvial soils. Such soils cover 30%, 34% of total geographical area, and is one of the highest, productivity belts you'll find in this country, and highest productivity because they're most fertile soil. So these soils are mostly present where they are present. They are present mostly in the river sides. So alluvial soils are found in Indo-Gangetic plains. Already I mentioned that. Then the banks of other rivers in India, and you know what type of soil orders they are fitting into: anticells, insetticels, or alphicells and eridicells. So these four orders coming into this. But remember that we will talk about in details anticell, insetticell, alphicell, and eridicells. Coming to the next soil, that is the black soils. So these soils covers about around 17% of the total geographical area of this country, and these soils are predominant in which state? Maharashtra, as I mentioned, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and some parts of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. And you know what they are locally known as: Regur or Keral, Bhal or Tals. So these are all local names for this black soil, and they're also popularly known as black cotton soil because mostly cottons are grown in this part. That's why they are known as black cotton soils, and due to high clay content, 30 to 80%, you'll find the range is huge. And And these soils become sticky when wet. That is the characteristics of this soil, and develop wide cracks when dry. I'll give you one video about this soil, particularly go to the field and show you and talk about this in details. And thereby soil has extraordinary fertility. This is very high fertile soils and having more depth than any other soil also. And these soils, fit into the orders, verticals or inceptions or alpha. This category also is coming under this. Then red soil, these soils are about 10%, around 10.6 or 10% of total geographical area of the country. And the colors are red and vary from red to brown, chocolate, yellow, and gray. Red soils contain high percentage of iron content, and which is responsible for its color, red color. Such soils widely occur in southern parts of peninsula comprising the states Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh. So these states, they are having high areas in Madhya Pradesh also, Goa. And texture of the soil is highly variable from loamy sand to heavy clay, but generally they are loam to clay loam. And these soils fits into order alpicels, alticels, anticels, and inceptions. So soil order, this type of soil, very thin line between how to differentiate black soils, name black soils, but the orders they fitted in different category into this type of soils. So after red soils, then you come to laterite and lateritic soils. Of course, there is difference between laterite and lateritic soils. I will talk about this, and I give it to you. आप थोड़ा सा इसका different ढूंढ लीजिए, book देख लीजिए, because something you need to know also. So these soils are formed due to intensive weathering, means high rainfall areas, weathering of the parent rock, and these rich in aluminum and iron oxides and formed wet and hot tropical areas, mostly eastern part, northeastern part, in some parts, southern parts also. In Kerala, it occurs about 5.5% of the total geographical area of the country. It's found abundantly in the states like Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and Meghalaya, and soils are rusty red due to the presence of iron oxide, as I mentioned earlier. And these soils are almost deficient in most of the nutrient because pH is very low and they are acidic in nature. But they can be managed well with liming. Liming is essential for this to reduce the pH level and increase the availability of the nutrients, isn't it? And this order is aldicel and alficels. So next is your desert soils. Desert soil contain 90 to 95% sand, very sandy in nature and find in low rainfall areas, arid and semi-arid regions of the country. These soils are pale brown to yellowish brown in color. It occupies 8.8% total geographic area of the country. And it's found in Rajasthan, as I mentioned earlier, Gujarat, Haryana, and some parts of Punjab. The cold desert soils are also found in Leh Ladakh region of the country and has low content of nitrogen organic matter, very rich in calcium carbonate, so making them infertile. And then it's really very tough time, to manage these soils. And these soils fit in the order of aridosols and antisols. Again, I told you that we will talk about, big details about these soil orders. Now the time has come to know how many soil orders are there. If I ask you these questions, then you will probably tell me, sir, there are 12 soil orders. And let's talk about bit of. So name of the first name is jelly soils. So jelly soils are found in Arctic and Antarctic region, very cold region, near the poles, northern poles and southern poles, as well as extremely high elevation areas. It covers about 9% of the world's surface. So jelly soils. Then histosols. Histosols are very productive farmland and proper drainage, very rich in organic matter actually. Such soils are not suitable for foundations or roadways because high organic matter content, so they are not strong enough to support. It covers about 1% of the world's surface. And next is spodosols. Spodosols are found under coniferous vegetations in a humid region of the world. They tend to be acidic in nature and have low fertility and low clay content. And it covers about 4% of the world's surface. Then andisols. So these soils are developed due to weathering of volcanic matter. So where you find volcanoes and those areas you'll find andisols. and typically occur in areas of moderate to high rainfall and about 1% of total area of the world. Then oxysols are found in tropical and subtropical regions, and such soils are dominated by presence of iron oxides, quartz, highly weathered clay minerals. Then it occurs about 8% of the world's surface. That oxysols I already mentioned earlier in soils of India. Then vertisols are clay-rich soils found in arid and semi-subhumid region also. These soils therefore shrink as they dry, swell, and they become wet. So if I ask you one question, so where you find swell shrink potential in soil, you'll say that black soils or vertisols, and it occurs about 2% of the total world surface. Then arid soils are formed due to aerisols, one order. That aerisols are formed dry climates, hot and cold desert, as I mentioned in Gujarat, Leh Ladakh region of India, and you'll find accumulation of salts, gypsum, or carbonates of different salts. It covers about 12% total geographical area of the world. Then altisols means ultimatum. No further anything is highly weathered soils in humid areas, and they are formed and are intensively weathered, as I mentioned. These soils contain relatively high clay content in the subsurface, are acidic in nature because it's already weathered, so all bases are leached down, and it covers about 8% of the world surface. So next is mollisols. Mollisols are highly fertile soils and rich in calcium and magnesium. They are often found in climates with pronounced rises. It covers about 7% of the. Where you find mollisols in Tarai region of India, mollisols you'll find, and alphisols. Alphisols are rich in aluminum iron oxides, which are less weathered and slightly acidic in reaction. It covers around 10% of the world's area. Insect cells occurs in wide range of parameter and climatic conditions, but it covers 17% of the world surface and mostly alluvial cells. We call it alphisols, insect cells, and anticells. Then anticells occurs recently deposited sediments in alluvial origin. They commonly occur in all environment. It covers about 16% of the total areas of the world. So friends, there are 12 orders and all. It's bit of different. It's very important to know all those things. जैसे कि पता है कि थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट भी है थोड़ा याद रखना बिकॉज सॉइल टैक्सोनॉमी जब आप पढ़ेंगे यू व्हेन यू लर्न अबाउट सॉइल टैक्सोनॉमी यू गेट इन डिटेल्स because each orders having specific characters, distinct characteristics, distinct horizon, distinct soil production processes, and with that distinct horizon, you get to know that whether it's alluvial, whether it insect cell, anticells, or aerisols, or verticells, whatever maybe. So you have to remember one day, probably another video, I'll show you what are those characteristics and how to learn about it. So when you talk about different types of soil, definitely we talk about bit of the problematic soils in India. What are those problem soils in India? Because all soils are not fertile, whatever I mentioned earlier. There are some problems. They need different management practices, isn't it? So problem soils are those soils having some problem in due to availability of nutrients. They are not unsuitable for they are not suitable for cultivation. Then they are uneconomic. They are not economical. So without adopting proper reclamation measure, you cannot grow or cultivate in these soils. So even a good soil may turn into problem if not managed properly. You have to remember that. So management of soils are important. That's why we talk about sustaining soil productivity, soil health management. So that concept of soil health, if you don't maintain the soil health properly, a good soil can be a problematic one due to mismanagement. So all soils contain soluble salts, isn't it? But when the concentration of these soluble salts goes up and the electrical conductivity goes up, then they becomes unsuitable for cultivation. Then it comes the problem soils or saline soils. So the problematic soils can be, excessive dryness, wetness, compaction, acidity, salinity, sodicity, or lack of fertility. That limits crop production. So such problem soils are around 7% of world's total geographical area, and the extent of when you talk about the extent of salt affected soils, then you'll find, in India, it is one of the most important problematic soils and covers more area than any other problematic soils. So when you talk about the Indian problematic soils, then problem soils, then saline soils comes into um, in your mind. So these soils contain higher amount of neutral soluble salts which adversely affect plant growth, and these salts mainly due to the chlorides and sulfates of sodium, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. But saline salts also contain appreciable quantities of chlorides and sulfates of calcium and magnesium. Next is sodic soils, because when you talk about these soils, again we have to go in details. So sodic salts, salts of sodium, and that's why alkaline nature and pH is very high, and they're dispersive in nature. So, so these two problematic salts, salines and sodic salts. Then how to manage saline salts? So when you talk about saline salt, definitely the things that it comes in your mind, how to reclaim saline salts. These salts, reclaim through scrapping, flushing, and leaching processes. So removing the surface, excess salts on the surface by scraping it and flushing with good quality irrigation water down the profile. They get soluble and goes down the profile, and remove the excess salt by ponding of fresh water on the soil surface and allowing it to infiltrate into the surface. But in sodic soils, we need gypsum or calcium chloride solution. Other substances such as sulfuric acid and sulfur compounds, pyrite, they also helps in reclamation of sodic soils. So it's very simple. In saline soils, what you do, we flush with water, good quality water. So what the salt becomes soluble, drain it. In alkali soils, we use gypsum or pyrite. So you remember this. This very simplest things. And in acid soils, it's also problematic soils, so you want all the soils to be in the pH range of 6.5 to 7.5, but that never happens. Acid soils are very problematic soils, and due to low pH, most of the nutrients are not essential plant nutrients are not available. And to make it available, we go for different processes. And these soils, generally rich in aluminum iron oxides, found in areas with high rainfall and high altitude also. So though they lacked in basic cations like calcium, magnesium, and distribution of acid soils in India, in the eastern, northeastern part, then some parts, southern part in Kerala also. How to manage the acid soil? So management of acid soil is just important because we have to increase the productivity. In this case, आप क्या करना चाहते हैं? For acid soil, we go for liming, calcium carbonate, calcium magnesium carbonate, dolomite. We go for application of that, and that helps in reclaiming acid soils. In addition to this, we can go for manure applications or fat-bed manures, green manures helps in reclaiming the acid soils. So friends, this is in nutshell actually. Yeah, I have not given details. So when you listen to me, you'll find that you know uh, I have given everything just in short form, just to learn something about soil science. More details you need to read some good books, and but when you listen to my video, just you have in mind that okay, just listen carefully. These are all some of the important things. I just just you can say that listing out some of the things that you should know. Rest of the things I told you very early, no chalk, no pen, no blackboard, whiteboard, or no markers for this class. Only to learn, listen, and some of the important things I talked, and more details you follow the books. But for your basic understanding, this channel, you listen to me carefully, and I hope these videos will help you a lot and make you understood many things, very small basic things about soil science. So thank you for watching. Have a great day, stay safe, and maintain good distance and follow COVID protocols. Thank you very much. Have a great time. Thank you, friends.